Why did the room feel colder when she walked in? The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a harsh white glare bouncing off steel and concrete. Major Sarah Morgan sat motionless in the interrogation chamber, her back straight, hands folded lightly on the table. On the surface, calm, but beneath that surface, storm. At 29, she was younger than most officers who wore her rank, and the men across the table knew it. They studied her like a specimen pinned under glass. One was a general with a face carved from stone, the other a recording officer, expression hidden behind a wall of regulation indifference. "Major Morgan," General Wallace began, his voice rough as gravel, "you stand accused of compromising a high-level operation resulting in American casualties. How do you respond to these allegations of treason?" The word hit the air like a hammer. Treason. Sarah didn't flinch. Her emerald eyes stayed locked on the man's face, her voice even. "Sir, with respect, you don't have the clearance for what happened 6 months ago." A beat of silence, then the general's face darkened. "You dare question my authority?" Sarah's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "Not your authority, sir, your clearance." Before Wallace could reply, the door swung open. A man in a tailored suit entered, carrying a folder stamped with layers of classified markings. Silver hair, immaculate shoes, not military, something higher, something quieter. "This interview is terminated," the man said, placing the document before the general. Wallace scanned the page, his jaw tightened. Who the hell authorized this? "The Secretary of Defense," the man replied calmly. "Major Morgan's record is sealed. She was deployed on Operation Nightshade. That remains classified at the highest levels." The room fell silent. Sarah's face revealed nothing, but inside her chest a weight shifted, the kind of weight only memory carried. She let her eyes lower briefly, not in submission but in remembrance. And in that silence her mind slid backward. 6 months earlier, to the sand, the storm, and the beginning of the mission that had changed everything. The desert storm had raged for 3 days straight. A curtain of ochre dust blurred sky from ground, turning the air itself into something hostile. When Sarah stepped from the transport helicopter at FOB Sentinel, her silhouette was swallowed by the storm's embrace, indistinguishable, for just a moment, from the endless swirl of grit and shadow. Few noticed her arrival. Those who did barely looked twice. A duffel bag slung across one shoulder, blonde hair bound tight, a lieutenant's bars catching the faint light. To most, she was just another replacement officer assigned in the middle of nowhere. Captain William Hayes stood waiting, goggles shielding his eyes against the storm. His voice carried no warmth, no hostility either, just fatigue. "Lieutenant Morgan, welcome to the edge of nowhere." Sarah saluted crisply, her voice raised over the howl of wind. "Thank you, sir, reporting as ordered." He eyed her paperwork, shaking his head. "Camp Lejeune Training Division. Strange time to send us an instructor." "I go where the Marine Corps sends me, sir." Inside the command center, the storm's roar dulled to a muted rumble. A cluster of Marines turned as she entered. Their stares weren't subtle. New blood. A woman. Rumors already forming behind those hardened eyes. One man stepped forward, a broad-shouldered figure with the kind of stare that cut deeper than any knife. His voice carried across the room. "So they sent us a Barbie doll to play soldier." He circled her slowly, like a wolf testing the edge of prey's resolve. "Tell me, Lieutenant, you ever hear a shot fired in anger?" The room fell silent. Sarah met his gaze, unflinching. "Yes, Sergeant, I have." Master Sergeant Max Donovan, Alpha Team Leader, a career soldier whose scars, both visible and invisible, told their own story. To him, Sarah was a liability, a distraction, maybe worse. "Your file says expert marksman." His tone mocked the words, "but paper targets don't shoot back." Sarah let the silence stretch, then quietly, "No, Sergeant, they don't." The other Marines chuckled under their breath. But one, Staff Sergeant Carlos Ramirez, watched her differently. His eyes didn't carry scorn but curiosity. Something in her tone unsettled him. Donovan's bark broke the moment. "Gear up, patrol at 600. Try to keep up, Princess." As the squad dispersed, Ramirez lingered near her. "Don't mind him," he muttered. "He's lost good people, makes him cautious around newcomers." Sarah nodded once. "I understand caution. It keeps you alive." What no one noticed was the man in the corner, dressed in nondescript clothing, watching. A civilian. His eyes followed Sarah longer than anyone else's. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded before fading into the shadows. 7 years earlier, Quantico. The crack of rifle fire echoed across the training range. A young Corporal Sarah Morgan, just 22, lay prone in the dirt, her cheek pressed against cold steel. Through her scope, 1,000 yards dissolved into a single, still point. The target shattered, dead center. "Impressive," drawled Master Sergeant James Blackwood, a legend among scout snipers. "Now do it again, 15-mile crosswind." She adjusted her scope without hesitation. Fired, another hit, bullseye. Blackwood's grizzled face softened with something rare. Respect. "Might just be the best natural shot I've seen in 30 years. Up in the observation post, 2 men watched her with sharper interest. One wore the quiet authority of a Marine colonel. The other, a suit, his eyes unreadable. "Her father was one of ours," the colonel said quietly. "Berlin, 89, one of the finest ghost hunters we ever fielded." The man in the suit tapped a folder. "Phantom Blade. The professor is active again. She might be the answer." "She's not ready," the colonel objected. "Then it's time we gave her reason to be," the suit replied. His smile never touched his eyes. On the range, Sarah chambered another round, unaware that her future was being carved in silence above her. Present day, Jungle Valley. 3 hours into patrol, Sarah knelt in the mud. The others tramped past, heavy boots crushing roots and brush. But she saw it, something small, something out of place. A footprint, fresh, combat boot tread. "Sergeant," she called, keeping her voice low, "we've got traffic." Donovan stomped over, impatience already burning in his eyes. "That's animal sign, Lieutenant." "With respect, Sergeant, it's not. Size 10, military issue, standard Russian tread." Laughter from the squad. Only Ramirez stayed quiet, his eyes narrowing as he looked closer. "When I want your expert tracking analysis, I'll ask for it," Donovan snapped. Sarah said nothing, but the air had shifted. She could feel it, pressure building. The jungle was too quiet. The silence wasn't natural. They pushed on, deeper into the valley. Sarah's every instinct screamed trap. She spoke again, quieter this time, almost to herself. "This valley's a funnel, perfect for an ambush." Donovan spun on her, fury flashing. "That's enough, Lieutenant. You're here as an observer, nothing more." The radio operator's voice cut in. "Sergeant, scattered transmissions. Close. Can't make out words." Sarah's hand brushed against her rifle. Her M40A5 felt warm beneath her fingers, alive. The silence pressed heavier. And then, a glint just for a heartbeat. Sunlight off steel in the rocks ahead. "Contact," she whispered. The jungle exploded. Gunfire erupted from the ridgeline, bullets ripping through leaves and dirt. Alpha team scattered, diving for cover. Sarah didn't move. Her body acted before thought. The scope rose. One breath, squeeze. A man collapsed in the distance. Another target moved for Ramirez. Another breath. Another shot. The world narrowed to angles, numbers, precision. "Get to cover," Donovan roared, a round grazing his shoulder. But Sarah ignored him. She saw the trap unfolding. This wasn't chaos. It was a design. Someone had set the board, and she could see the one weak point in their lines. "They're herding us south," she shouted, her voice cutting clean through the storm of fire. "Break northeast, that's the gap." Donovan's rage twisted his face. I gave you an order. And I'm giving you a way out, she replied, steady, as another hostile dropped through her scope. Unless you want us all dead here. Ramirez's voice broke the hesitation. Sarge, she's right, I see it too. A curse, then Donovan barked the new order. Northeast, move. The squad leapfrogged through rocks and brush, returning fire as they went. Sarah's rifle never missed. One after another, enemies fell. But Donovan didn't make it far. A round tore into his leg, sending him crashing down. Sarah was already there, pressing bandage to wound, her voice calm, precise. Through and through, you'll live. You'll never last 5 minutes covering us, he growled. A flicker of a smile, try me. Before he could stop her, she was gone, fading into the jungle, rifle already raised. The squad saw flashes through the trees, shots like clockwork, one enemy, then another, a corridor carved by invisible hands. She's clearing the way, Ramirez whispered, awe in his voice. Donovan, pale with pain, could only watch. That's not a training division officer, he muttered. That's something else. Night fell heavy. The jungle pressed close, thick with shadows and secrets. Alone now, Sarah smeared mud across her skin, her rifle cradled like an extension of her heartbeat. 17 enemies had entered the valley. 9 were dead. The rest regrouped in the darkness, disciplined, professional, not insurgents, soldiers. She studied their campfires from afar, her scope painting faces against the flames. And then one figure caught her breath. His bearing, his walk. Military, yes, but more than that, familiar. Something inside her stirred, recognition, but from where? Her rifle stayed trained. Her finger rested on the trigger. And then she whispered to the night, her voice barely audible. This wasn't supposed to be random. This is something else. The jungle gave no answer. Only silence. How long could silence last before it became unbearable? The jungle was alive with unseen eyes. Sarah Morgan moved through it like a shadow, though every rustle, every broken twig beneath her boots felt deafening in her own ears. The night had swallowed Alpha Team whole, leaving only her to haunt the terrain between enemy and friendly lines. She had chosen this. She had told Donovan she'd cover the retreat, even as his blood seeped into the earth from his leg wound. They had looked at her like she was already dead. Maybe she was, but duty, instinct, and something deeper, something more personal, kept her tethered to this hell. Her hands traced the familiar weight of her M40 sniper rifle. Cold steel, wooden stock worn smooth with years of service. In her grip, it was more than a weapon, it was an anchor. Through the scope, she scanned the enemy camp below. 8 men left, well-trained, disciplined, moving with the kind of precision that set them apart from ragtag insurgents. These weren't locals defending their valley. These were professionals. She noted their guard rotations, counted steps between each change, logged the cadence of their radios, the subtle hand signals, the way their boots pressed into the mud. This wasn't Afghanistan's usual chaos. It was orchestration. And she knew that signature. Her breath slowed, her pulse steadied. In the distant firelight, one man stepped forward from the shadows, taller than the rest. Civilian clothes, but a soldier's walk. She couldn't see his face, didn't need to. Something in her blood recognized him before her mind could. She adjusted the focus, catching the faintest glimpse before he vanished back into the compound. And in that fleeting second, the impossible thought bloomed. It can't be him. She didn't whisper it aloud, though the words echoed in her skull like a gunshot. For years, the stories of her father's death had been neat, clean, official. A training accident, a closed casket, end of file. But tonight, beneath a foreign sky, with firelight painting strangers in familiar shapes, those stories cracked open. Her hand drifted unconsciously to the small metal lighter she carried in her pack, the one artifact of him she'd ever had. Engraved initials, Jam, John Alexander Morgan. She had never known the truth of how it ended, and now someone out here did. But not yet. For now she remained still, a sniper's stillness. Hours passed as the night wore thin. She didn't move, didn't flinch, even as the crickets fell quiet and the jungle seemed to hold its breath. At dawn movement, the enemy broke camp. Their precision unnerving, packs sealed, gear checked, radios humming. Not insurgents, mercenaries, possibly ex-Spetsnaz. Sarah followed, a ghost in the undergrowth. 3 hours of tailing them left her dehydrated, ankle throbbing from the earlier fall she refused to acknowledge. She had trained for worse. Scout Sniper School had taught her how to let pain dissolve into background noise. The mission remained, always the mission. The trail led to a valley hidden in folds of rock. And there it was, a compound that didn't exist on any map. Concrete walls disguised by camo netting, half buried to avoid detection from above. Antennas bristling like spines from its roof. She went prone, glassed it with her scope, counted patrols, logged shift changes, every detail stored for later. Then she saw him again, the tall man from the night before, this time closer, his gait precise, his stance sharp, and something in the tilt of his head, the way he scanned the perimeter, sent a chill straight through her. The professor, Anton Vyulov. The name had lived in whispers through the intelligence community for decades, a Cold War ghost, a trainer of shadows, her father's mentor once, or so the classified fragments had suggested. He had defected, worked for the Americans, vanished, reappeared years later as an enemy. Some called him traitor, some called him myth. Now he was flesh and bone, standing in a jungle valley. Sarah's trigger finger twitched on reflex, but she didn't fire. Orders echoed in her memory. Capture if possible, confirm first, don't burn the lead. She lowered the rifle, her heartbeat slowed. But before she could slip away, the sound came. Behind her. The faintest shift of rock, not wind, not animal. She rolled instantly, knife drawn in silence. 3 shadows emerged from the tree line, rifles raised. They moved too quietly, too clean, professionals. One spoke in clipped English, Russian edge curling beneath the words. The famous American ghost, not so invisible after all. Sarah's knife hit the dirt. For a fraction of a second, they relaxed, focus narrowing on the fallen blade. She exploded upward. A kick to the leader's knee, bone snapped. She rolled, seized the nearest rifle midair, fired 3 rounds in 2 seconds. 2 men down. The third gurgled as her blade slid clean across his throat. 5 seconds, silence again. The leader writhed, coughing blood. Sarah zip-tied his wrists, gagged him, and dragged him behind cover. Her hands worked fast, efficient. Search revealed Russian comms gear, a map scrawled with red circles across valleys and ridges, including FOB Sentinel. Her stomach clenched. This wasn't just a forward camp, it was part of something larger. She activated her secure comms device, voice low. Ghost Control, this is Nightshade. Authentication Sierra Alpha 49er Delta. The reply came sharp. Authentication confirmed, report. 17 hostiles encountered, 9 neutralized, 8 remain in compound. Confirm high probability target, Anton Vyulov. Static, a pause, then, primary objective is your safe return. Exfiltrate immediately. Sarah's jaw tightened. She watched the compound through her scope one last time, the professor, the man who had trained her father. With respect, she whispered, this is our first solid lead in 3 years. I'm proceeding with secondary protocol. She cut comms before they could argue. Because she already knew, some missions weren't about orders, they were about ghosts. By dusk she had circled the compound, finding what she expected, a ventilation shaft disguised among rocks. Soviet design, predictable, always a back door. The great lock gave way to her tools. She slid inside, body moving like liquid through the narrow steel throat of the complex. Minutes stretched into eternity as she crawled. past comms rooms, past maps spread across walls marked with American bases, past weapons being altered in ways she didn't fully understand. She documented everything with her miniature camera, each shutter click silent as a breath. And then she saw the table, the maps, the words, Operation Crimson Scythe. Her throat went dry. 3 forward operating bases, coordinated attacks, 72 hours, FOB Sentinel primary target. Dozens, maybe hundreds of lives. Marines she had eaten with, walked beside, traded quiet jokes with. Donovan, Ramirez, Alpha Team. She felt the paper between her fingers, copied details into memory. She had to warn them. She had to. Voices outside the chamber. She pressed against the vent grate, barely breathing. The American patrol was eliminated as planned, one voice said. Russian, sharp. And you're certain none survived, a second voice. Older, calm, too calm. Sarah froze, that voice. It crawled through her bones. She couldn't see him, but she didn't need to. Vyulov. A pause, then his tone sharpened. If they've captured one of ours, the operation is compromised. Find them. Eliminate them. Their footsteps receded. Silence returned. Sarah's chest heaved once. Then she moved, fast, back through the shaft. The intel burned in her brain, in her veins. But the alarm wailed before she reached the grate. Her prisoner discovered. Searchlights burst across the jungle. Shouts filled the compound. She scrambled through the vent, dropping to the cliffside. Rocks tore her hands. Search beams swept her way. Gunfire cracked, stone splintered. She let go. The fall ripped the air from her lungs. Pain seared her ankle when she hit the ravine. She forced herself upright, limping through the narrowing gorge as bullets stitched the rock around her. And then the ground gave way. She plummeted into darkness, into steel. When she came to, she was lying on a metal grate, the air stale, the tunnel man-made, Soviet. Her light flicked on. Filing cabinets, computers, cases of biological samples, claymores disassembled and rebuilt in unfamiliar ways. And then, a voice in the darkness, smooth, controlled, waiting. Welcome to my workshop. I've been expecting someone like you for a very long time. Her pistol cleared its holster before thought. The beam of her light cut across the chamber. He stepped forward, silver hair, weathered face, cold, assessing eyes. Anton Vyulov, the professor. Sarah's hand tightened on the trigger, but his words pinned her still. John Morgan's daughter. The ghosts never stay buried, do they? Her blood went cold. How did he know her father's name? And in the glow of her light, he set something on the table between them. A battered lighter, Marine Corps emblem, initials engraved, Jam. Her father's lighter. Sarah's heart stuttered. She had seen it before in old family photos, always in his hand, always near. Vyulov's gaze never wavered. He gave this to me the night before our last mission together, said it brought him luck. His voice softened, strangely human. The next day, he took the bullet meant for me. Sarah's pistol stayed raised. Her training screamed shoot. Her orders demanded it. But her father's ghost was alive in the lighter between them. And for the first time in years, doubt trembled in her grip. Why didn't she pull the trigger? Sarah's finger hovered, steady on the pistol, every ounce of training screaming end it now. Yet something in the man's voice, in the lighter lying between them, cut across instinct. Anton Vyulov, the professor, enemy of the state, traitor, Cold War ghost, her father's old mentor. He didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't flinch. He only watched her with eyes that saw deeper than she wanted to be seen. You look like him, he said softly. The set of the jaw, the same refusal to bend, even when bending would save you. Stop, Sarah snapped, voice colder than the steel in her hand. But Vyulov only stepped closer, slow, deliberate. He gestured to the lighter. This isn't a trick, Major Morgan, that belonged to your father. He carried it through Berlin, through Chechnya, through missions that don't exist in your clean little files. He died giving me the chance to live, and your government buried that truth." Her heart hammered. She tried to shove the words aside, tried to lock them behind the walls she'd built since childhood, but the lighter's glint in her beam cut through those walls. She remembered photographs, that same metal square in his hand, always there, always near. "You're lying," she said, though her voice cracked on the edge of doubt. Vyulov's face didn't move, only his eyes softened in a way she hadn't expected. "Am I? Then why wasn't it returned to you? Why did they give you a closed casket?" The question stabbed deeper than any blade. Sarah wanted to fire, wanted to silence him, silence the storm inside her head. But before she could decide, the ground itself trembled. A distant explosion, then another closer. The tunnel shook, dust raining from its ceiling. Somewhere above, the world roared. Vyulov tilted his head, not surprised, almost amused. "Your people came sooner than I calculated. Carpet bombing, no precision, just fire. They'd rather burn this valley than let me walk away." Sarah steadied her pistol again. "Then you're not walking away." But Vyulov only smiled faintly. He set his own weapon down on the table, a gesture that chilled her more than if he'd aimed it. "Next time we won't have this conversation. Consider that my gift, from one ghost to another." Before she could react, he moved toward a concealed door at the far end of the chamber. The steel hissed as it slid open, revealing the low thrum of helicopter rotors. Sarah raised her pistol, aiming clean for his chest. One squeeze and this ended. One squeeze and she could walk back to FOB Sentinel with his death confirmed. But her eyes flicked just once to the lighter. That hesitation was enough. Vyulov slipped through the door, sealed it behind him. The chamber trembled again, as another explosion tore through the complex. Sarah lunged for the table, snatching the lighter before fire and concrete could bury it forever. Her father's initials burned cold against her palm. Jam. The roof groaned. Beams buckled. She ran, the tunnel collapsing behind her in rolling waves of destruction. Each step tore pain through her sprained ankle, but adrenaline drowned it. She burst through a camouflaged exit just as the chamber caved in, the shockwave hurling her down the slope. For minutes, maybe hours, she lay in choking dust, lungs burning, ears ringing from the concussive blasts. And above the haze she saw them. F-15 Strike Eagles carving the sky, dropping payload after payload on what had been Vyulov's compound. The mountain burned. Sarah fumbled for her comms device, shattered. Dead. Only the emergency beacon Ramirez had pressed into her hand still blinked faintly. She activated it, tucked it close, and began the long, agonizing crawl away from the ruins. Her pack bulged with stolen documents, fragments of weapons designs, photographs of maps. Proof. Not enough maybe, but enough to warn the base. Every step was a war against her body. The ankle swollen, the cuts along her arms raw, blood sticky on her skin. But worse than the pain was the gnawing thought she couldn't silence. Why didn't I shoot him? At FOB Sentinel, silence pressed against every wall. Alpha Team stood watch like statues, rifles across knees, eyes never leaving the jagged ridges to the east. Ramirez adjusted the binoculars, throat dry. Nothing. Donovan limped up beside him, leaning on his good leg. His jaw was tight, his face pale. She's gone. You don't know that, Ramirez snapped back, more harshly than he intended. Donovan's eyes flicked to the horizon. I know what ambushes look like. I know what it takes to survive alone out there. She bought us time, that's all. Ramirez didn't argue, but in his gut he refused to believe it. He had seen the way she moved, the way her rifle spoke like an extension of her will. That wasn't training division skill. That was something else, something beyond. The alarm cut across their silence. Not the shriek of an attack, but the measured pulse of approaching personnel. The Marines at the gate raised rifles, eyes straining through the dust. And there she was. A figure limping, uniform shredded, one eye swollen shut but walking with a steady, unbroken pace. Ramirez lowered the binoculars, whispering, "Jesus Christ, she's alive." Sarah staggered into the base, her pack still gripped like it was part of her body. Donovan caught her before she collapsed, supporting her with arms steadier than his words. "You look like hell, Lieutenant." A ghost of a smile cracked her lips. "You should see the other guys." She wouldn't let go of the pack. Even as medics swarmed, even as blood caked her skin, she rasped one demand: "Command Center, now." The tactical room fell silent when she entered. Colonel Harrison stood rigid by the display table. Captain Hayes lingered at his side. And Thomas Wright, the shadow in a suit, leaned against the wall, his gaze unreadable. Sarah dropped the pack onto the table, spilling its contents: photographs, documents, blueprints of modified claymores, maps marked with arrows pointing straight at Sentinel. 72 hours, she said hoarsely. 3 forward bases. This one is primary. They're planning to use these. She shoved the explosive schematics forward, modified mines to disperse chemical agents, incapacitate defenses before the main assault. The room absorbed the words like a body takes a punch. Captain Hayes swore under his breath. Donovan, standing behind her, stared at the diagrams with disbelief. "Chemical weapons," he muttered, "son of a bitch." Sarah's eyes stayed on Harrison. "Sir, this wasn't insurgent work. These men were trained, disciplined, professional, and they had a leader, Anton Vyulov." At that name, Harrison's mask cracked for a fraction of a second. Wright's gaze sharpened, unreadable but not surprised. "You confirmed visual ID?" Harrison asked carefully. Sarah hesitated, then dropped the lighter onto the table. The colonel's face blanched, Wright's jaw tightened. "My father," Sarah said flatly. "Vyulov had it, and he knew. He knew things about my father's death that I was never told." The silence thickened until it pressed like a physical weight. Donovan looked between them all, eyes narrowing. "Somebody want to tell me what the hell going on? Who the hell is this Vyulov?" Wright finally spoke. "Former KGB, defected, helped us train special operations units in the 90s, disappeared 3 years ago, re-emerged as the architect of half a dozen attacks on our assets, and if what Major Morgan brought back is accurate, he's not done yet." "Major?" Donovan echoed, eyes snapping to Sarah. Sarah straightened. Despite the blood, despite the bandages, her presence filled the room. Harrison spoke quietly. "Lieutenant Morgan was cover. She is, in fact, Major Sarah Morgan, Ghost Hunter Program." The words fell like stones into still water. Donovan's jaw worked. Ramirez, standing in the doorway, stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Sarah didn't look at them. She kept her eyes on the colonel. "I need your answer, sir. Do we treat this as imminent attack?" Harrison studied her. "Finally, yes, condition Delta, full defensive posture, and Major." His voice softened, rare cracks in the stone. "Well done." Sarah gave a faint nod, but inside her chest the storm only grew darker. Because she knew Vyulov was still alive, and the lighter in her hand wasn't just proof, it was a question. What had her father died for, and why had the truth been buried? Later in the medbay, Colonel Harrison entered alone. The room was quiet, the low hum of machines filling the space. Sarah sat on the edge of the cot, ankle bandaged, uniform still streaked with blood and dust. He closed the door behind him. His face was carved with years of command, but in his eyes a flicker of something almost like regret. "How much did he tell you?" Harrison asked. Sarah met his gaze. "Enough to know I've been lied to my whole life." Her voice was sharp, but beneath it, the wound was deeper than anything bandages could touch. Harrison sighed. "Your father was a hero, Sarah. What happened in Grozny was complicated." Sarah's jaw clenched. "He died saving Vyulov's life, not in a training accident, not in some sterile report. You knew." He didn't deny it, he only nodded slowly. "Your father insisted on going in. He got the samples out, He bought us time to counter a weapon that could have killed thousands. His sacrifice mattered. And you let me grow up believing a lie. His eyes didn't waver. Would it have changed the daughter you became? Would it have made you a better Marine? Or just broken you before you were ready to carry the truth? Her hands balled into fists. She wanted to argue, wanted to lash out, but deep down the question bit hard. Because she didn't know the answer. Outside, the night deepened around FOB Sentinel. Marines dug in, reinforced positions, cleaned weapons. The air carried the weight of waiting. Sarah stood at the window of her quarters, staring out toward the mountains where Vyulov had vanished. The lighter lay warm in her palm. Her father's initials caught the faint glow of light. She whispered to the silence, her voice raw, steady. "I'll find the truth, Dad, even if I have to burn every shadow to get it." Behind her, the faint hum of a helicopter grew louder, reinforcements arriving. But Sarah knew reinforcements alone wouldn't win this war. Because what was coming wasn't just a battle. It was a reckoning. Why did the reinforcements feel like strangers? The helicopters came at midnight, rotors chopping the desert air, their floodlights cutting through the storm like spears. Marines crowded the landing zone, weapons slung tight, boots sinking into dust and grit. But when the first figures disembarked, silence spread across the base. They weren't regular infantry. They moved differently, cleaner, quieter, a stillness in their posture, an edge in their eyes, ghost protocol. Sarah watched from the command tower, her ankle wrapped tight, her rifle propped against the wall beside her. 10 men in black tactical gear formed a wedge around their leader, a tall woman, helmet tucked under her arm, eyes sharp enough to cut steel. Colonel Harrison's voice carried over the landing zone. "Welcome to FOB Sentinel. Identify." The woman snapped a salute, voice steady. "Commander Elise Kincaid, Ghost Protocol Task Force." Even her words felt heavy. Ghost Protocol wasn't spoken of lightly. It wasn't a unit so much as a rumor. The kind of rumor whispered in training halls, about operators pulled from different branches, trained off books, deployed only when the stakes were beyond the ordinary. Sarah descended the stairs, drawn by instinct. Kincaid's gaze found her instantly. The commander didn't smile, didn't soften, just studied her as if weighing a puzzle piece against the whole. "So this is her," Kincaid said at last, almost to herself. "The one who walked out of the valley." Sarah stiffened. "Major Sarah Morgan, scout sniper." Kincaid tilted her head. "No, not just that. Ghost hunter. You've been in the shadows longer than most of these men have been alive. Why haven't I seen you before?" "Because you weren't supposed to," Sarah replied quietly. For the first time, Kincaid smiled. It wasn't warm, it was recognition. "Good, we'll need ghosts for this fight." Hours later, the war room glowed with maps and red markers. Harrison stood at the head of the table, Kincaid and her task force flanking him. Sarah lingered at the edges, the lighter heavy in her pocket. Kincaid laid out the scenario in clipped sentences. Vyulov's plan wasn't just to hit FOB Sentinel. The documents Major Morgan recovered confirmed simultaneous assaults across 3 regions, diversionary strikes, but this base is the centerpiece. If Sentinel falls, our presence collapses across the corridor. Supply lines cut. Allies scattered. We're blind. Ramirez leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Donovan sat stiff in a chair, leg bandaged but eyes sharp. Both listened, silent. Harrison nodded. "Estimated timeline." 48 hours, Kincaid replied. "Maybe less if Vyulov accelerates. His people are ghosts too. They'll come in waves. Direct, indirect infiltration. Psychological. He'll test for cracks before he breaks the wall." Sarah stepped forward. "He's already inside the wall." The room turned. She pointed at the maps, the spread of red circles. The compound wasn't just a staging ground. It was a lab, Vyulov's modifying mines, chemical dispersal agents. If he plants them inside the perimeter, Marines won't be able to fight. They'll choke before they can even raise a rifle. Kincaid's jaw tightened. You're saying he'll infiltrate before the assault? Sarah nodded. He's too smart not to. Silence pressed heavy, then Harrison's voice cut through. We hold, we dig in. No one penetrates these walls. If Vyulov comes, we break him. It was the kind of statement commanders were supposed to make, strong, final, but Sarah saw the flicker in his eyes, the doubt. Because Vyulov wasn't just coming, he was already here. Later in the armory, Sarah checked her M40. The scope gleamed clean, the bolt smooth, the suppressor threaded tight. Her hands moved with ritual precision, the kind of care given to a living thing. Ramirez approached, his voice low. They all act like you're some kind of legend now. I'm not, she said, not looking up. He leaned against the rack beside her. You walked out of an ambush 17 Marines couldn't. You brought back intel that saved this base. You faced down Vyulov and lived. If that's not legend, what is? Sarah paused. Her throat worked before she found words. Legend doesn't feel like this. He frowned. Like what? Like doubt. Like knowing I had the chance to end it and I didn't. Like carrying questions about my father I'm not sure I want answered. Ramirez was quiet for a long moment. Then, softer, maybe not pulling that trigger wasn't weakness. Maybe it's the only reason you're still alive to fight him again. She didn't reply, but she felt the truth in his words gnawing at her. By dawn, FOB Sentinel bristled with defenses. Sandbags doubled, barbed wire unrolled, mortars calibrated. Kincaid's team spread across the perimeter, their movements sharp, efficient, like wolves scenting danger. Sarah climbed the east tower, her rifle slung. The desert stretched out before her, endless ridges fading into haze. Quiet, too quiet. Through her scope, she scanned valleys and ridges, searching for the flicker of movement, the glint of steel. Nothing. And yet, her gut twisted. The kind of twist you didn't learn from textbooks. The kind you learned only after years of surviving things you shouldn't have. Something was wrong. Behind her footsteps, Kincaid climbed into the tower, her expression unreadable. You feel it too. Sarah kept her eye on the scope. He's not going to come at us in daylight. He'll bleed us first, quietly. He's already probing. Kincaid nodded. Good, you think like him, that's why you're here. Sarah finally looked at her. Why am I here? You don't bring me in just because I can shoot straight. Kincaid's eyes held hers steady. Because you're not afraid of him, because he's afraid of you. The words lodged deep, afraid of her. The thought didn't fit, and yet part of her wanted to believe it. The radio crackled. South Gate, movement. Both women snapped to focus. Sarah's scope swung south. Dust rose faintly on the horizon. Figures in rags stumbled forward, their gait broken, desperate. Civilians, refugees, women clutching children, men dragging the injured. Marines shifted uneasily. The gates held. Permission to open, sir, a young private called. Harrison's voice came back sharp. Negative, no one enters until cleared. Sarah's gut twisted harder. Through her scope she caught the faint outline beneath the ragged clothes. Not civilians, not refugees, harnesses, explosives strapped tight to chests. Don't open the gate, she shouted, voice cutting across radios. But the private was already moving, already reaching for the lock. Sarah didn't think, she fired. The round struck dead center. The figure collapsed and detonated. The explosion ripped the desert open. Fireball engulfed the gate, Marines thrown back in showers of dirt and shrapnel. Screams tore the air. The other refugees broke into a sprint, detonations chaining behind them. Suicide vests. The south gate dissolved into chaos. Sarah kept firing, her scope finding targets, each shot punctuated by thunder. But for every one she dropped, another got closer. Ramirez's voice bellowed over comms. Secondary breach, east wall. Gunfire erupted from within the base, not outside, inside. Sarah spun from the tower, heart pounding. Vyulov hadn't just come, he was here, already inside the wire. The base became fire and madness. Kincaid's team engaged in brutal precision, clearing room by room. Marines scrambled, some half-dressed, weapons barely loaded. Sirens wailed. Sarah dropped from the tower, boots hitting dirt, rifle swinging across her back. She sprinted through smoke and fire toward the east wall, where gunfire hammered hardest. Her breath came ragged, her ankles screamed with each step, but she pushed on. And then she saw him. Through the smoke, through the haze of fire, a tall figure walked with calm purpose. No weapon raised, just walking, eyes cold. Vyulov. Their gazes met across the chaos. For a moment, time stilled. He raised a hand, not in surrender, in recognition, as if this battlefield, this storm of fire, was just another classroom and she was still the student he had been waiting for. Sarah froze, her rifle rose, her finger curled. But the explosion behind her threw her to the ground, ears ringing, vision blinding white. When she blinked through the smoke, he was gone. Again. And in his place, the wreckage of FOB Sentinel burned, screams echoing into the desert night. By dawn, the fires still smoldered, dozens dead, the south gate a crater, the east wall blackened ruin. Sarah stood among the wreckage, hands shaking, lighter clenched in her fist. She whispered, voice hoarse, broken. He's not just attacking us, he's dismantling us, from the inside out. And as the sun rose over the desert, one truth hardened in her chest. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was personal. How many times could one night replay before it broke you? Sarah Morgan walked through the ruins of FOB Sentinel as the sun clawed its way over the ridgeline. Smoke still drifted from the shattered south gate. Medics knelt over bodies, some covered, some still breathing through blood-soaked bandages. The air reeked of burned fuel, charred earth, and grief. Her boots crunched glass and twisted metal. Each step pulled her deeper into the wreckage, but she couldn't stop. She had to see it all. She had to feel the weight of every life snuffed out in the fire. Ramirez limped toward her, his sleeve torn, blood crusted on his temple, his voice cracked. We lost 31. The number hit like a hammer. Sarah's throat tightened. She didn't ask how many were civilians. There were none. Vyulov had stripped that word from the battlefield. Everyone here was either a fighter or a body. Behind them, Donovan barked orders, his legs still bound but his voice unbroken. He wouldn't stop moving, not until he dropped. Sarah envied that. Her own body felt like it had betrayed her. The moment Vyulov had looked at her, everything had slowed. She had frozen. Again. Ramirez studied her face. You think this is on you? It is on me, she whispered. No, he said firmly. It's on him. Don't give him the victory of taking your mind too. But she didn't answer, because in her heart she already knew Vyulov wasn't just after the base. He was after her. In the war room, the atmosphere was ash and steel. Harrison stood hunched over the table, shoulders bent by losses that couldn't be repaired. Kincaid and her ghost team flanked him, their black armor smudged with soot. Sarah stood opposite, bandaged hands resting on the edge of the table. The lighter was in her pocket, burning a hole through the fabric. Kincaid's voice was ice. This wasn't just an attack, it was a message. He wanted us to bleed, to doubt, to fracture. And he succeeded, Harrison muttered, his voice raw. No, Sarah cut in sharply. Her eyes were bright, fevered with something between fury and clarity. He hasn't succeeded yet. But if we sit behind these walls and wait for him, he will. Harrison's eyes lifted, red-rimmed. What are you suggesting, Major? Her voice was steady, but her heartbeat thundered. We hunt him. We take the fight back into the jungle, find the trail before he vanishes again. The room bristled with silence. Donovan growled from the corner, that's suicide. Maybe, Sarah said. But so is waiting for him to choose the time and place. Kincaid studied her for a long, heavy moment, then nodded. She's right. Harrison slammed a fist against the table. We don't have the manpower left. We need reinforcements, supplies. We don't have time, Sarah cut in. The document said 48 hours. If the other assaults launch, this entire corridor collapses, and Sentinel is already half broken. Kincaid's voice sliced through. Then Ghost Protocol goes hunting, with Major Morgan leading the trail. The colonel's jaw tightened, but deep down he knew. He looked at Sarah, something like resignation softening his face. You find him, you end this, or don't come back. That night, as the camp smoldered, Sarah sat alone at the edge of the wire. The desert stretched infinite, the horizon sharp under the moon. She turned the lighter over in her hand, her thumb brushing the initials again and again. Jam. Her father's voice rose in memory, not his words but the sound of him. Laughter carried through childhood nights, silence at the breakfast table before a deployment, the way he'd look at her like he was already trying to memorize her face. Had he really died saving Vyulov? Had the man who haunted her every nightmare once been saved by the man she loved most? The thought carved her open. She struck the lighter once. A flame bloomed, trembling in the desert air. For a moment she let it burn, then snapped it shut. Behind her, Kincaid's footsteps, quiet, deliberate. You keep that like it's more than metal. It is, Sarah said without looking up. Kincaid crouched beside her. He'll use it against you, against what it represents. Sarah's jaw tightened. Then I'll use it against him first. Kincaid studied her profile. There was no softness in the commander's eyes, only recognition, the kind one predator gives another. You're not like the others here. You don't fight for flag or orders. You fight for ghosts. Sarah turned then, her eyes sharp. And what do you fight for? Kincaid didn't answer. She didn't need to. The silence was enough. The next day, Ghost Protocol moved. They slipped into the jungle at dawn, their silhouettes swallowed by vines and shadow. Sarah moved at the point, her M40 balanced against her shoulder, every sense stretched taut. Ramirez trailed close, quiet, steady, the one familiar thread in the tangle of new wolves. They moved fast, no chatter, only hand signals. The jungle swallowed sound, leaving only breath and heartbeat. For hours, nothing, just heat pressing down like a hand, the air thick enough to choke. Sweat slicked every face, but no one faltered. Then Sarah froze. Her hand shot up, fist closed. The line halted. On the trail ahead, something gleamed faintly in the mud. She crouched, brushing leaves aside. Wire, almost invisible, connected to a crude but deadly device buried beneath roots. Tripwire, she whispered. Kincaid moved forward, eyes narrowing. He's playing with us. He knows we'd find it. Sarah's skin prickled. She looked deeper into the jungle, her scope painting shadows into clarity. And there, just beyond the tree line, a figure watching, still, waiting. Her breath caught Vyulov. Before she could line up the shot, he raised a hand. Not a weapon, just a gesture, deliberate, like a teacher waiting for a student to answer. Then he turned and vanished into the trees. Sarah surged forward. It's him. Kincaid's hand clamped onto her shoulder, iron strong. That's what he wants. He's baiting you. Sarah shook her off, fury blazing. Then let him. I'm done waiting. She sprinted down the trail, past the tripwire, into the thick tangle of jungle. Branches tore at her arms, mud sucked at her boots, but she didn't stop. Behind her, Kincaid's voice rang sharp. Morgan, stand down. But Sarah didn't. Because for the first time, she wasn't chasing orders. She was chasing truth. And Vyulov had just left the door open. The jungle closed around her, swallowing the noise of the team behind. Each step deeper felt like crossing a line she couldn't return from. The echoes of last night's screams still rang in her ears. The weight of the lighter burned in her pocket. Somewhere ahead, Vyulov was waiting, not fleeing, waiting. And Sarah knew, whatever happened next would not just decide the mission. It would decide who she truly was. How far could a body go before the mind betrayed it? Sarah's boots sank into the sucking mud, each step heavier than the last. Sweat stung her eyes, her throat raw with thirst, but she didn't slow. Every branch clawing at her skin, every insect buzzing in her ears, all of it blurred against the one image burned into her sight. Vyulov, raising his hand like he was calling on her in some unholy classroom. She forced herself forward, the lighter bouncing against her chest pocket with every stride. Her ankle screamed from the old sprain, but she ignored it. Pain was an old companion. Minutes blurred into hours. She could no longer hear Kincaid's team behind her. She was alone now. Alone in the jungle, chasing a ghost who wanted to be found. That was the part gnawing at her. Vyulov wasn't running, he was leading. The first sign came at dusk. She stumbled into a small clearing, breath ragged, rifle raised. And there, nailed to the trunk of a tree, was a photograph. Her breath caught. It was old, edges yellowed. A Marine unit standing shoulder to shoulder in desert camo, faces younger, harder. In the back row, taller than the rest, was her father, John Morgan. Beside him, Anton Vyulov. Sarah's knees weakened. She reached out, fingertips trembling against the photo. It was real. The ink, the cracks, the faces. Her father's smile frozen in time, standing beside the man she now hunted through hell. Scrawled across the bottom in black marker, history repeats itself. Her hand clenched around the photo. Rage boiled in her veins. She ripped it down, shoved it into her pack. "Not this time," she whispered. Night bled over the jungle, thick and suffocating. She sat up in the crook of an old tree, rifle balanced across her knees, the lighter warm in her hand. Sleep didn't come, only shadows. At some point, exhaustion dragged her under, and in the dream her father's voice came, not words, just his presence. She saw him standing at the range, smoke curling from the rifle in his hands. He looked at her the way he had when she was a child, that rare mix of pride and warning. But when she stepped closer, the face changed. Vyulov's eyes stared back at her. She woke with a start, breath-sharp, rifle clutched. The jungle was silent, too silent. Her ears caught it then, a faint clicking. Metal on stone, Morse code. She froze, listened. Her blood chilled. She didn't need the whole message. She knew enough Morse to recognize the pattern. Sarah. Her name tapped through the jungle night. She swallowed hard. He knows me, he's right there. Every instinct told her to move, to escape. But her feet dragged her forward, step by step, following the faint, taunting rhythm of her own name carried on steel and stone. By dawn she was near collapse, her canteen empty, her limbs trembling. She broke through a wall of vines and froze. Ahead lay a small encampment, abandoned but not old, bedrolls still warm, food half-eaten, and in the center a single object left on a crate. A journal. She approached slowly, rifle trained. No traps, just the book. Her hands shook as she opened it. The first page bore her father's handwriting. Her knees buckled. She dropped onto the crate, staring at the ink as if it were blood. Berlin, Grozny, the missions no one will ever know. Vyulov beside me each time. He saved me once. I saved him more than once. But his eyes, they're changing. He's slipping into shadows I don't recognize. Page after page, stories she had never been told, operations buried, sacrifices erased, and threaded through them all Vyulov, mentor, brother, rival, shadow. And then near the end, words that stole the air from her lungs. If something happens to me, Sarah deserves the truth. She was always meant to finish what I started. Her vision blurred. Her father's voice seemed to whisper through the ink itself. She wanted to keep reading, to devour every line. But then a sound, a crunch of bootsteps behind her. She spun, rifle raised. Vyulov stood 10 yards away, unarmed. His silver hair caught the morning light, his face calm, almost paternal. Her hands trembled, dropped to the ground now. But he didn't move, he didn't even blink. Instead, his voice came soft, steady. Your father wrote those words for you, not the colonel, not your government, for you, because he knew one day you'd have to choose what kind of ghost you would be. Her finger tightened on the trigger. Vyulov's eyes locked on hers, cold, sharp, but not without a flicker of something else. Regret, admiration, she couldn't tell. You think I'm your enemy, he said, but the men who sent those bombers, they're the ones who buried your father. I tried to protect him. I failed. And now I'm trying to protect you. Her breath came ragged. Protect me. You slaughtered 31 Marines at Sentinel. You strapped bombs to children. His expression hardened. War isn't clean, you know that. The only difference is that I don't lie to myself about it. Your colonel, he'd burn villages just to keep a supply line open. Your generals, they'd sacrifice you the moment it served the mission. Enough, she shouted, her rifle shaking. You're not my father, you're not my family, you're not anything but a target. And still he didn't move. His voice softened again, almost gentle. Then why haven't you pulled the trigger? The question cracked her like a whip. Her breath hitched, her vision swam. Every part of her screamed to fire to end it, but her finger froze. Because he was right, she couldn't. Vyulov stepped closer, slow, deliberate. Because part of you knows, he whispered. You were meant to inherit more than a rifle. You were meant to inherit the truth. She wanted to scream, wanted to shoot, wanted to silence him forever. But her body betrayed her. The rifle trembled. The world tilted. The exhaustion she had ignored for 2 days finally crashed over her. Her knees buckled, darkness surged. The last thing she saw before her vision collapsed was Vyulov's hand, reaching not for a weapon, but to catch her before she fell. When she woke, the world was dim, metal walls, a faint hum, the air smelled of oil and damp stone. She tried to sit up, restraints bit into her wrists. Her rifle was gone. Her chest rose and fell in ragged breaths. She was alive. And in the chair across from her sat Vyulov, calm, waiting. You should hate me, he said quietly, but part of you is beginning to understand. Her voice was hoarse, raw. I'll never understand you. Vyulov leaned forward, his eyes sharp. You will, because you're not fighting me, Sarah. You're fighting the lies they built around you. And when those lies fall, you'll see who your real enemy is. He slid something across the table, another photograph. Her father standing beside Vyulov, both younger, both smiling. On the back, scrawled in familiar handwriting, "Trust him when I cannot." Sarah's heart stopped. She didn't know if it was real. She didn't know if this was manipulation. But she couldn't deny the feeling rising inside her. Doubt. And Vyulov saw it. Welcome to the other side of the truth, he said softly. The restraints cut into her wrists as she pulled against them. Her eyes burned with fury, with confusion, with grief. Because the one thing she had built her entire life on, the certainty of who was enemy and who was family, was crumbling. And she had no idea what would be left when the dust settled. How long could a mind hold out before the cracks showed? The room was dim, metal walls sweating with condensation. A single lamp hung above Sarah, throwing sharp light across her restrained wrists. Her muscles ached from tension, her throat dry, her body hollowed by hunger and exhaustion. Across from her, Vyulov sat as if time meant nothing. His posture was calm, his breathing steady, his eyes patient. He didn't interrogate, he didn't threaten, he just talked. Do you know why I chose this place? He asked quietly. His Russian accent was faint, worn thin by decades of slipping between languages. It was an old Soviet relay station. We built it to last. Steel, stone, deep tunnels, forgotten by everyone but me. Sarah said nothing. Her lips were pressed into a thin line. She stared at the floor, willing herself not to meet his gaze. He leaned back, hands folded loosely. Your silence tells me everything. You're afraid if you speak, you'll hear your father's voice in my words. Her eyes snapped up, sharp with defiance. You don't get to say his name. Vyulov's face didn't change. I already did, because I knew him better than anyone else, better than the generals who ordered him around, better than the politicians who buried his death under paperwork. He trusted me, in the end more than he trusted them. The lighter weighed heavy in Sarah's pocket. She wanted to throw it at him, to burn away his calm with her fury, but instead she spat words like broken glass. "You let him die." Vyulov shook his head slowly. "No, he chose to die. He stepped in front of me knowing the shot was coming. He saved me, Sarah, the same way he hoped one day I would save you." Her stomach twisted. The memory of the journal pages cut like blades. She was always meant to finish what I started. Her father's handwriting, his words, his intent. But was it real, or another carefully planted lie? Vyulov leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "He saw something in you, not obedience, not blind loyalty, something purer, the courage to break free from chains. You think you're free, but you're not. You wear a uniform that decides who you are before you even speak." Sarah barked a bitter laugh. "And what? You're offering me freedom. You kill civilians, blow up bases, turn children into bombs. That's your version of free." For the first time, Vyulov's face cracked, just slightly. A shadow of something that might have been pain flickered across it. "You think I wanted that?" he asked, voice lower. "You think I wanted to watch 31 of your comrades burn? No, that was your commander's choice. They left them unprotected, unprepared, because they were nothing more than pawns on a board. I forced their hand, and in doing so I exposed the lie." Sarah's fists clenched against the restraints. She wanted to scream, wanted to end this endless war of words. Instead, she steadied her breath. "Don't give him what he wants. Don't break here." But in the cracks of silence, her father's face surfaced again, not as memory but as doubt. Would he have believed this man, trusted him? Had he really given him that lighter, that trust? Vyulov studied her with predator's patience. "You're at the crossroads now, Sarah. One path, you go back to them. You let them chain you again. You become a ghost they use until you burn out, forgotten. The other path, you see the world as it is. You walk with me, and together we finish what your father began." She locked eyes with him, her voice cutting. "You think you've broken me." Vyulov tilted his head, almost smiling. "Not broken, freed." The words sat heavy in the air. Hours passed, or days, time blurred. Vyulov's men brought food and water, but Sarah barely touched it. She studied everything instead, their routines, their weapons, the layout of the tunnels each time they led her to the latrine or let her walk under guard. She memorized the creak of the hinges on her door, the hum of the generators, the blind spots in their movements. Even in chains, her sniper's mind was working, calculating, waiting. But every time Vyulov entered, he pulled her back into the storm. "You remind me of him," he said one evening, sitting closer than before. "The same eyes, the same fire." He asked questions no one else dared. "That's why I trusted him. That's why I trust you." Her voice cracked through the haze. "Trust isn't what you're after. Obedience is." "No," Vyulov said, shaking his head. "Obedience is what they demand. I want the opposite. I want you to look at me and see the truth. Your enemy is not me." She swallowed hard. Her throat burned. "If you think I'll ever fight beside you, you're insane." He didn't flinch, didn't lash out, only whispered, "We'll see." That night, when the guards left her alone, Sarah pressed her head back against the cold steel wall and closed her eyes. She imagined her father standing before her, not Vyulov's twisted version, but the man she remembered. The man who had taught her to ride a bike, who had cleaned his rifle with reverence, who had once told her, bravery isn't never feeling fear. It's choosing what to do when fear comes. Tears burned hot behind her eyes. "Dad," she whispered into the darkness, "what am I supposed to do? Who am I supposed to believe?" The silence answered, but in it she felt something steady, not words, just the weight of her rifle, even though it wasn't there. The way it had always steadied her hands, her breathing, her soul. Her rifle was truth. Her training was truth. Her choices, hers alone, were truth. And in that moment, Sarah realized something Vyulov had missed. He wanted her to doubt, to fracture, to lose her grip on who she was. But the very act of resisting him, of questioning herself and surviving it, that was strength, not weakness. The next morning Vyulov entered again, same chair, same patience. But this time, Sarah met his gaze without wavering. "You think you've got me cornered," she said quietly. "But you're wrong. I've been listening, watching. You think this place is your fortress. It's not. It's your coffin." Vyulov studied her, something flickering behind his eyes. She leaned forward, voice cold. "You're not my father. You're not my truth. You're just another target. And when the time comes, I won't hesitate again." For the first time, Vyulov's mask cracked. A faint frown creased his face. And Sarah smiled, a hard, razor-thin smile. Because she had found her center again. That night the chance came. One guard, younger, overconfident. He unshackled her wrists to let her stretch, his rifle slung carelessly. Sarah's movement was liquid, swift. A twist, a strike, a choke. The boy collapsed unconscious before he hit the floor. She stripped him of his sidearm, his knife, his radio. Her wrists bled from the cuffs, but she didn't care. She slipped into the tunnels, heart pounding, the taste of freedom sharp on her tongue. The corridors stretched endless, lit by the hum of failing bulbs. Every corner carried the risk of discovery, every step a calculation. And then voices. Vyulov, calm, commanding, just ahead. She crept closer, pistol raised, heart hammering. "She's stronger than I expected," Vyulov was saying. "If she survives this, she will be ready. If she dies, then she was never the one." The words chilled her blood. Was she a soldier, a target, or a test? She steadied her pistol, breath caught in her chest. This was her chance. And yet, even as her finger tightened, a shadow of doubt whispered, "Or is it exactly what he wants?" Before she could fire, the alarm blared. Guards shouting, boots pounding, her escape discovered. She sprinted down the corridor, heart slamming, the pistol hot in her hand. Bullets tore the walls around her. She burst into a cavernous chamber and froze. The walls were lined with crates, weapons, chemical agents, enough to poison entire valleys. And in the center stood Vyulov, waiting. His eyes met hers, calm, almost proud. "You've chosen," he said softly. Her pistol shook in her hand. Around them his men swarmed, rifles raised. Sarah's chest heaved. The chamber burned with shadows and smoke. And she knew in that instant there was no more room for doubt. The end game had begun. How do you know when the end has come? For Sarah Morgan, it wasn't the sound of gunfire. It wasn't the ring of boots pounding against steel. It wasn't even the circle of rifles leveled at her chest. It was the silence. The way Vyulov stood in the center of the chamber, calm as if this was all rehearsed. The way his men waited for his signal, not firing, not moving, just holding their aim as though frozen in time. And his eyes, those cold, sharp eyes that saw her not as a prisoner, not as an enemy, but as something else. "A ghost should not be afraid of shadows," Vyulov said softly. Sarah's pistol stayed raised, her breath steady, though her body screamed with fatigue. She forced her voice level. "You think I'm afraid of you?" He tilted his head, almost smiling. "Not of me, of what you might become." The words struck harder than the barrels aimed at her. She wanted to fire, to end this, but deep in her chest, something whispered caution. Every move, every step, every word from him had been designed to shape her, to corner her into his story. But she wasn't here to be written by him. "I'm not my father," she said, her voice steel, "and I'm not yours." His expression softened for a heartbeat, almost like pride. Then he raised a hand. The rifles clicked tighter into place. "Then prove it," he whispered. The chamber erupted. Sarah dove sideways as bullets shredded the air where she'd stood. She fired 3 rounds in quick succession. 2 guards dropped, the third staggered. She rolled behind a crate, adrenaline burning away exhaustion. The chamber became thunder, rifles cracking, bullets splintering steel. Chemical canisters hissed where rounds pierced them, filling the air with acrid fumes. Sarah held her breath, mind working faster than fear. She wasn't going to win by killing them all. She was outnumbered, outgunned, but not outwitted. Her father's voice echoed in memory. Bravery isn't never feeling fear. It's choosing what to do when fear comes. She scanned the chamber, saw the scaffolding above, the weak points in the structure. One crate shifted from gunfire, revealing C4 packs wired into detonators. Her lips parted in a breathless laugh. He'd built his own grave without realizing. She crawled through the smoke, fired twice more, each shot precise, dropping another pair of men. The others shifted, disoriented by the fog and the ricochets. She leapt up the scaffolding, ankles screaming, lungs burning. A burst of fire tore the railing beside her, but she kept climbing. At the top, she slammed her last magazine into the rifle. A deep breath, calm, steady. Through her scope, the world shrank to Vyulov below. He wasn't firing, wasn't hiding. He stood in the open, watching her with eyes that almost dared her to pull the trigger. For a moment she saw her father in him, the stance, the calm, the weight of a man who carried too many ghosts. Her finger tightened, and then she shifted aim. Not him, the detonators. She fired. The explosion ripped the chamber apart. Fire bloomed, swallowing crates, tearing steel from its foundations. His men screamed as shockwaves hurled them into walls. Sarah fell with the scaffolding, hitting the ground hard, vision flashing white. She crawled, coughing through smoke and fire, body screaming with every movement. Through the haze, Vyulov staggered upright. Blood ran from his temple, his clothes scorched, but still he stood. Still he watched her. "You had me," he rasped, "and you chose the fire instead, just like him." Sarah forced herself to her feet, pistol trembling in her hand. She aimed at his chest, every nerve demanding she end it. But he stepped closer, unafraid. "You think killing me will end this? No, I've already won. I put doubt in you. You'll carry it forever, and one day you'll see I was right." Her vision blurred with tears, from the smoke, from the fury, from the truth she might never know. She whispered through clenched teeth, "You don't get to write my ending." Her finger squeezed. The shot echoed like a bell. Vyulov staggered back, a hole torn through his chest. His eyes widened, not in fear, but in recognition, as if this was the moment he had always been waiting for. He fell, the fire consumed him. Sarah stood frozen, chest heaving, the pistol lowering at last. The chamber collapsed around her. She stumbled through falling beams, through fire and smoke, every step a war against gravity. And then light. She burst from the tunnel into the night, collapsing onto the jungle floor, coughing, shaking, the lighter still clenched in her fist. Above, the stars burned indifferent. Hours later, she woke to the sound of rotors. Marines swarmed the jungle, Kincaid at their head, Ramirez at her side. They lifted her up, eyes wide at the sight of her bloodied, broken frame. "What happened?" Kincaid demanded. Sarah's voice was a whisper, ragged but steady. "It's over." Ramirez pressed a canteen to her lips. His eyes asked the question he didn't say. She only shook her head. "Not all ghosts can be killed, but this one won't haunt us anymore." Back at FOB Sentinel, the fires were out, the dead buried, the walls rebuilt. Life crept back, scarred but alive. Sarah stood alone at the edge of the wire, staring into the horizon. The lighter lay in her palm, its metal scarred by fire, initials still shining faintly. Jam! She struck it once. Flame bloomed, steady against the wind. Her father's face came to her, not in pain, not in doubt, but in memory. His laugh, his steady hands, the warmth in his eyes. She snapped the lighter shut, slipped it into her pocket. Her voice was low, meant only for herself. "I don't need all the answers. I just need to keep moving. The desert stretched endless before her, but she felt no fear. She had chosen her path, not Vyulov, not her commanders, hers. And as she walked back into the shadows of Sentinel, she carried the truth of it quietly, like the weight of her rifle. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.